Vincent van Gogh was born in 1853 and died only 37 years later. He was a Dutch post-impressionist painter who is among the most famous and influential figures in the history of Western art. In just over a decade, he created about 2,100 artworks, including around 860 oil paintings, most of which date from the last 2 years of his life. They include landscapes, still lifes, portraits, and self-portraits. His works are characterized by bold colors and dramatic, impulsive, and expressive brushwork that contributed to the foundations of modern art. Born into an upper-middle-class family, Van Gogh drew as a child and was serious, quiet, and thoughtful. As a young man, he worked as an art dealer, often traveling. He then turned to religion and spent time as a Protestant missionary in southern Belgium. He drifted in ill health and solitude before taking up painting in 1881. His early works were mostly still lifes and depictions of the peasant laborers he got to know as a missionary. They were dark and gloomy, holding few signs of the vivid color that distinguished his later work. His younger brother Theo was very supportive to Vincent and helped him financially. The two kept a long correspondence by letter. In fact, the most comprehensive primary source on Van Gogh are these letters. Their lifelong friendship and most of what is known of Vincent's thoughts and theories of art are recorded in the hundreds of letters they exchanged from 1872 until 1890. Theo van Gogh was an art dealer and provided his brother with financial and emotional support and access to influential people on the contemporary art scene. When he was 27, he moved to Paris and lived there with Theo. His brother introduced him to many important artists at the time, including members of the avant-garde, such as Paul Gauguin and Georges Seurat, who were reacting against the Impressionist sensibility. As his work developed, he created a new approach to still lifes and local landscapes. He began collecting Japanese ukiyo-e prints and became highly influenced by the bright colors used by Japanese artists. Due to this influence, his paintings began to brighten in color as he developed a style that became fully realized during his stay in Arles in the south of France in 1888. The move to Arles was motivated by his health, having become ill from drink and suffering from smoker's cough. He also seemed to have moved with thoughts of founding an art colony. The time in Arles became one of Van Gogh's most prolific periods. He completed 200 paintings and more than 100 drawings and watercolors. He was enchanted by the local countryside and light. His works from this period are rich in yellow, ultramarine, and mauve. His paintings include harvests, wheat fields, and general rural landmarks from the area, including the old mill, a picturesque structure bordering the wheat fields. In Arles, he rented the Yellow House, where he used it as a studio and his home. He wanted a gallery to display his work and started a series of paintings that eventually included Van Gogh's chair, Bedroom in Arles, The Night Cafe, Cafe Terrace at Night, Starry Night over the Rhone, and Vase with 12 sunflowers, all intended for the decoration for the Yellow House. After much pleading from Van Gogh, Gauguin agreed to visit Arles in 1888. He hoped for friendship and the realization of his idea of an artist's collective. While waiting in August, he painted sunflowers. When Gauguin finally arrived in Arles on the 23rd of October, the two painted together for over a month. The single painting Gauguin completed during his visit with Van Gogh was Van Gogh painting sunflowers. Together during their time in Arles, their relationship began to deteriorate. Van Gogh admired Gauguin and wanted to be treated as his equal, But Gauguin was arrogant and domineering, which frustrated Van Gogh. They often quarreled. Van Gogh increasingly feared that Gauguin was going to desert him, and the situation, which Van Gogh described as one of excessive tension, rapidly headed toward crisis point. You may have heard of the account of Vincent cutting off his ear. The exact sequence of events which led to this is not known, but according to Gauguin, that night held several instances of physically threatening behavior. It seemed likely that Van Gogh had realized that Gauguin was planning to leave. After the altercation with Gauguin, he severed his left ear with a razor, causing severe bleeding. According to beliefs, he bandaged the wound, wrapped the ear in paper, and delivered the package to a woman at a brothel that Van Gogh and Gauguin both frequented. Despite a pessimistic diagnosis, Van Gogh recovered and returned to the Yellow House about a month later. He spent the following month between hospital and home suffering from hallucinations and delusions of poisoning. In March, the police closed his house after a petition by 30 townspeople was issued. During that time, Van Gogh gave his 1889 portrait of Dr. Felix Ray to Dr. Ray, his physician. The doctor was not fond of the painting and used it to repair a chicken coop, then gave it away. In 2016, the portrait was housed at the Pushkin Museum of Fine Arts and estimated to be worth over $50 million. After the episode in Arles, Vincent never really recovered. During his life, Van Gogh suffered from psychotic episodes and delusions, and though he worried about his mental stability, he often neglected his physical health, did not eat properly, and drank heavily. In addition, he was quite poor and often relied on his brother's financial help. Van Gogh entered an asylum about 20 miles from Arles about 6 months later, accompanied by his caregiver, a Protestant clergyman. There, Van Gogh had 2 cells with barred windows, one of which was his studio. The clinic and its garden became the main subject of his paintings. He made several studies of the hospital's interiors. Some of his works from that time are characterized by swirls, such as The Starry Night. He was allowed short supervised walks, during which time he painted cypresses and olive trees. About a year later, Van Gogh suffered a severe relapse. Depressed and unable to bring himself to write, he was still able to paint and draw a little at his time. His late paintings showed an artist at the height of his abilities, according to art critic Robert Hughes. In July of 1890, Van Gogh wrote that he had become absorbed in the immense plain against the hills, boundless as the sea, delicate yellow. He wrote that they represented his sadness and extreme loneliness, and that the canvases will tell you what I cannot say in words. Wheatfield with Crows, also created in July 1890, was one of Van Gogh's last paintings, and is discussed as being associated with melancholy and extreme loneliness. On 27 July 1890, aged 37, Van Gogh shot himself in the chest. There were no witnesses, and he died 30 hours after the incident. Theo rushed to his brother's side, finding him in good spirits, but within hours Vincent began to fail, suffering from an untreated infection resulting from the wound. He died in the early hours of 29 July. According to Theo, Vincent's last words were, "The sadness will last forever." There have been numerous debates as to the nature of Van Gogh's illness and its effect on his work. The consensus is that Van Gogh had an episodic condition with periods of normal functioning, suggesting possibly bipolar disorder. Whatever the diagnosis, his condition was likely worsened by malnutrition, overwork, insomnia, and alcohol. Van Gogh was unsuccessful during his lifetime, but became famous after his suicide and exists in the public imagination as the quintessential misunderstood genius. the artist where discourses on madness and creativity converge. His reputation began to grow in the early 20th century as elements of his painting style became incorporated by the Fauves and the German Expressionists. He attained widespread critical, commercial, and popular success over the ensuing decades and is remembered as an important but tragic painter whose troubled personality typifies the romantic ideal of the tortured artist. Today, Van Gogh's works are among the world's most expensive paintings to have ever sold. His work, The Portrait of Dr. Gachet, is valued at over $161 million. His legacy is honored by a museum in his name, the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, which holds the world's largest collection of his paintings and drawings.